top 5 shows. Just talk about show, the wrestler. Now we're talking about. I'm not going to talk about.
So my top 5 show, I've got a show from Roppongi 3K. Arkin's the best show. Showtime.
Okay. So you went first for Unappreciated. I'll go first this one. Wrestle Kingdom 14 Day 1.
You've done it with days.
Yeah. But include the second one because I still rate the first one better than the second one, personally. Yeah. So okay, Wrestle Kingdom then. Let's just leave it at that. I could speak for Day 2 because I just wrote that off in my head because it was really good, but it just didn't make this top 5, so I just didn't bother making too much research in it. It was a weird one, this, because it had the weakest start of any of my top 5 shows here. It was like a terrible, because it's New Japan at its worst, where it has like tag team after 3-man tag after 3-man tag after 2-man tag after 3.
It was the Liger stuff as well, so it was all like dads. A lot of it was dads.
Yeah.
I think on night 2, wasn't it? Takahashi and Ryo Lee were in there or something. But obviously they were busy, so they had like the dad's tag and stuff like that. And it was just like, as much as it was a nice moment for Liger and obviously the way he wanted to go out, I mean, it's just all the dads. It's just not that fun to watch.
No, it was very long. Although the matches themselves, when I had a look over on the wiki page with the times and such, it's quite short. It was relatively short, but it just felt like forever to get to the stuff that we really truly cared about, like singles matches, even the tag match, the actual IWGP tag match, because that was at the later end of all of those things. So, but it deserves to be in here because although it had the weak start, it had a tremendous ending. And I say ending, it's like middle and end, to be more exact. Of course, we had Takahashi and Will Ospreay. We had Ibushi versus Okada, which we'll get onto later. Sure we will, right? It was a phenomenal later end of wrestling, that match as a whole. Because the Takahashi Ospreay thing, I think for a lot of people is like up there. I rewatched a couple of ones that I really wanted to pay attention to, like to make sure that if I'm going to speak highly of this match, and stuff like that, I'm going to make sure I know my facts about it a bit more. The creativity on the show with Takahashi and Ospreay was absolutely stellar. It's one of the most ridiculous matches of this year. It was just phenomenal. Yeah. And then of course Ibushi and Okada, I think, was a stellar match in its own right. And then of course, whether you talk about the snap of Ibushi or you talk about the resilience of both men or Okada, and there was moments where it was him somewhat climbing a mountain against Ibushi because of how Ibushi portrayed himself like a god or some shit like that, because that's what they went all in on that towards the middle of the year rather than at the beginning of the year, him calling himself a god. But it felt like that. The story between the two was absolutely stellar, and having those two matches alone on that card was enough, because it was stellar. But then of course you did have your Jay White your Jay White and your Naito's, which in itself was absolutely fantastic as well. And I want to say as well, there was another particular match, like Jon Moxley, Lance Archer, of course. Although that wasn't the best of the best, it stood out because it was different from what was there as well. So you had a little bit of variety going in the show as well. So that was obviously fantastic. So there we are. That's just, it was fantastic.
Yeah, I've got that on my list as well. Obviously, I think everyone's going to have that somewhere in their top 5. But I'm going to go with my controversial, maybe.
Oh, God.
WWE Royal Rumble.
Interesting you say this. Go
on. Because I really like the Daniel Bryan Fiend match. It's pretty much the only Fiend match that I think actually stands up. It's basically all Daniel Bryan, but never mind. And the Royal Rumble, the men's match is my favorite Royal Rumble ever, and it's just amazing stuff. Baron Corbin versus Roman Reigns, even though the build to that match was terrible, I actually enjoyed the match, and I like how they just went everywhere. You really got a feel for how big the arena was, and I really like that. It was kind of like WWE's kind of silly matches done well. I can't actually remember anything else on that card. But those, and obviously the Women's Rumble was maybe the best Women's Rumble also. I'm not sure about that, but
I'm not sure. I'm not too sure. I think the ending was a bit of a stinker for me, but it was good throughout.
yeah, maybe the Becky Lynch one where Becky Lynch one was better, but it was a decent Rumble. But the bigger thing was the Men's Rumble. The way Brock Lesnar dominated for like the first half of that match, and they built it up for Drew to come and kick him out basically with the help of Ricochet, and then things like MVP turned back up, and that's turned out to be really good as the year went on. Edge obviously returned, and it was just like it just felt like for like an hour and whatever it was. Oh, WWE is good.
Yeah, no, it was WWE at its best. It was,
and the show itself was really good as well. Overall, like I really did like that Daniel Bryan versus the Fiend match, especially as well. So I was thinking I've got to like try and find some things for other companies, because this is, I think for both of us, our lists are pretty much completely New Japan and AEW, because that's mainly what we watch. This is only just what we think it's our things. It's not necessarily like an objective view of an expert in the industry or whatever. But I thought I was thinking of like shows, and I was thinking of New Japan. And I could have put a G1 night in here, but in all honesty, like you had like good matches, but then you'd have like a bit of an okay match, and I didn't find this G1 was amazing. And then besides Wrestle Kingdom, all the shows were a bit good, but always something a bit missing for me. And so I just thought, oh, what about the NXT takeovers? And I was like, nah, I didn't really like any of them that much. And then I just thought, oh, the Rumble was good, so I'll throw that as my number 5. But yeah.
Well, it's interesting you say that, my man.
Have you got it?
I've got G1 Climax Day 13.
Is that the one where Ishii faced Ibushi?
No, it isn't.
Oh. What happened on that one then?
It was Cobb versus Ishii, the one Cobb match I did like, and it was obviously Ishii and the big boys doing big toys. It was great. Ospreay versus Taichi, which was phenomenal in my taste. Like, yeah. I've really enjoyed that match. Suzuki versus Ibushi, which was phenomenal.
That was great.
And Okada versus Takagi, which was phenomenal as well. For me, this is arguably the best night of wrestling in the entire year. Like, in terms of pure wrestling,
top to bottom.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's like if you wanted a show and you wanted the most consistent amount of wrestling throughout the entirety of it, this is the show, in my opinion. This is what I would put in front of you. Because everything else does have its low points. I was going to go on to another show, but given that you talked about G1 Climax, I'll bring this in. So, yeah, that's just it. It just, let's be honest with ourselves, like, again, it's G1 Climax. It's all competitive. Yes, there are intricate stories throughout the shows and stuff, but at the end of the day, like, this is just this night as a whole. There's no blow-offs. Yeah. There's no big moments or anything like that. This is just a stellar wrestling show from top to bottom. So, yeah, that's just why it's there for me.
Yeah, it was that one, and then the one where Ishii faced Ibushi. I think that was the same night that Okada faced Ospreay. No, there was another great match on that card. I can't remember what it was, but there was another really good match on that card, and I think there were 3 really good matches. The bottom 2 were kind of okay, but the top 3 were all really good, and that I can't remember which ones they were. That might have been the night where Suzuki faced Taichi or something like that, and that was the fairly decent one. And there was a really good main event as well. But either way, those 2 were definitely my favorite 2 nights of the G1, and that one, undeniably, in terms of like top to bottom, the quality, probably the best from G1 anyway. Not better than the Royal Rumble though, was it? It probably was, but I just really like the Royal Rumble. It's the last time I ever felt like WWE wasn't terrible, like in terms of what they put out. Obviously, as a company, terrible. But last time I enjoyed a WWE show properly.
Yeah,
So,
like the thing is with the Royal Rumble, at least looking at it, because I just popped it up, like because I do think you're right. I do think it deserves a good show because it was WWE at their best in very intricate parts throughout the show.
yeah.
I've actually got something else in my list going forward, and it talks about the Royal Rumble as well, because that just goes to show like how we thought about the show as a whole, and it was their best show this year.
I completely forgot about Becky Lynch versus Asuka as well. That was an amazing match, also.
That's what I mean. It was brilliant, and
Yeah,
it was WWE at their best from a
yeah.
good portion of it as well. So yeah, definitely it deserves a good shout. But obviously, G1 Climax Day 13 for me, the best night of wrestling of the entire year. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm not. I don't know if you got this one, but I think you might. Full Gear, AEW Full Gear.
Okay.
I just felt like this was one of those shows where you only went in with high expectations, and they kind of meet them, but then still give you things where you weren't quite expecting them. I wasn't expecting FTR versus Young Bucks to be as good as it was because it was very close, I think, to Omega and Hangman versus Young Bucks. But without that crowd, I was like, in terms of my expectations, that is. But without the crowd, I was like, nah, it won't be up there. And then in in, in the execution of the match, it was actually not quite as good. I don't think personally, although some people thought it was better. But I thought it was really, really close.
Mm-hmm.
You had a really good amount of variety. I loved John Silver versus Orange Cassidy, and I just loved the fact that John Silver got a match like that just because he got over naturally. That was just something that made me really happy. Um, you obviously had John Moxley versus Eddie Kingston, which, again, as I spoke about earlier, had a lot of very intricate details, even though it wasn't match of the year or anything like that. And the story leading into it was just so good. Um, that it was just great. And it's just one of those shows that top to bottom, it had a lot of variety. Everything kind of met at least your minimum expectation, I'd say. And it was just a really fun night.
Yeah, of course. Like obviously, we had Omega, Adam Page. Then that was
Oh,
brilliant as
yeah, the
well.
open night as well,
Very
yeah.
quick, very quick. That's the one words I can remember thinking at the time. They got straight to the point, but it was fantastic anyway.
Yeah.
MJF versus Chris Jericho was okay, but it did have at the end of the day MJF winning that match had meaning going forward as well. So that was good to
Yeah.
see as well. Having a show with meaning, big deal. So and of course the Elite Deletion match
Yeah.
during Full Gear as well. So yeah, it is on my list. It is on my list. It's it's favorite up. I've got it for second personally. After
Oh,
looking
okay.
at the cards, because it took a while to spring back to mind. My memory's not the best. Anyone who at
And it
least
just had kind
follows
of
us
like
a bit.
match after match after match, which are all really good. Like, I don't think we mentioned Cody versus Darby, and then there's also
Yeah,
Kai
yeah,
Shiga
yeah.
versus Nyla Rose, which was not the best match. It wasn't as good as their Double or Nothing match, and there was like a couple of moments in there which were a little bit. But overall, the match as a whole was really good as well. And that Cody Darby match was really, really good. It was one of
Yeah.
those, like I said, it was just so consistent throughout. And then you had like an absolutely amazing match with Young Bucks versus FTR as well. So yeah,
It was. And it was just. Although I mentioned G1 Climax Day 13 was the best night of pure wrestling, I think this was the best pay per view
yeah,
of wrestling in terms of just going top to bottom quality. Just
mm.
pure quality. You might not reach the peaks of other shows throughout the year, but at the end of the day, it was pure quality and it was consistent in that. So yeah, absolutely. So obviously that's taken one off my list here, but I'm gonna move on to one that admittedly I forgot about, and I was looking because I didn't want to go to AEW New Japan Focus, but I thought I'd pick one out from this company, and that's NXT Takeover Portland. Um, it's pretty low on the list for my taste, but you did get some stellar stuff throughout compared to other takeovers throughout. Oh, what's the matter?
I just keep going, keep talking.
Oh, bloody yeah. Yeah, so you got Finn Balor Gargano.
Amazing.
It was fantastic. It opened up with Keith Lee Dijakovic, which was
Very good.
very, very good.
Very much overplayed by that point, though. It was a really good match, but then it was one where it's just like, okay, I've seen it like 5 times now.
Yeah,
That was my
and
only
I'm
problem
in
with it.
agreement with you. I'm absolutely in agreement with you. But
But it was
as an opener,
great. Yeah, it opened the show and it was really fun.
it was absolutely. We had Rhea Ripley versus Bianca Belair, which was quick. If I remember I remember us being a bit disappointed by how it could have been given more time.
It was really good, but it wasn't long enough from what I was hoping for.
Yeah, definitely. Low point for me was Kai and Tegan Knox.
Yeah, even though the match was great, like I remember we were sitting there like, this is amazing so much, and because I remember before that you were like, we were having a discussion as to whether it should be on Takeover or whether you should save it as like a TV main event. Because there were so many matches that they were building for that Takeover. I think this one had 6, whereas usually you'd have 5. And we were like, oh, maybe this is the one you leave off. And then as the match was happening, we were both like, oh no, they definitely shouldn't have left this off. This is great.
Yeah.
And then came the finish.
Yeah, poor finish.
Yeah. Ruined it.
Yeah, this isn't like, although I've mentioned this later on, this isn't like second for me. This is probably 4th, 5th. Then we got Broserweights and the Undisputed Era, which the story of the Broserweights being Matt Riddle and Pete Dunne. Of course, there's things going on with Matt Riddle and people's opinions, but I'm just going to talk strictly what happened in the show.
We didn't know that at the time.
Yeah, we didn't know that at the time. I'm just talking strictly of the show as a whole. The Dusty Rhodes Classic, them heading into this match, although it was a bit so-and-so, the entertainment factor between the two is absolutely phenomenal. It was obviously doing really well for them, and this particular match was really good in that as well. At least I thought, like, it was brilliant, if anything. Of course, you got Kyle O'Reilly and Bobby Fish in the event, so it's going to be great. And of course, they won that, so it was pretty decent. Although I don't like Undisputed Era. We're losing. It's never good. But then we had Adam Cole and Tommaso Ciampa, which is that the reason why you're a bit...
It's that and the Kai and Tegan Knox match, and also the fact that like when Keith Lee and Dijakovic happened, I was just like, this is fun and all, but I'm just very much over it. But yeah, the main event, it felt like kind of, because we'd had a lot of really fast-paced wrestling. I remember having a discussion at the time, and I kind of had a different opinion. And then when I actually thought back about it, I was like, yeah, I mean, there wasn't really too much to that main event. It was obviously a lot of great fast-paced action and stuff. But we'd had a lot of that night. And then there were just kind of kickouts after kickouts. And then obviously the way it finished with Gargano turning on Ciampa makes all the sense in the world. And at the time I was like, okay, they're going to blow this feud off. But the way they blew it off was terrible. And the whole kind of story after this was so bad that my memories on it now are like really lowered. But like, it was just one of those things where it was the start. It signaled for me the start of NXT just completely losing the plot of what they, like, basically the people in charge of NXT losing the plot of what they were doing. They just went, let's go to this again because this worked before. And it wasn't like because it was a story that needed to be told. It was something that kind of they forced in and stuff. And I was just like, didn't really need this. And I was at the time still excited moving forward, but I think as time's moved on, it's kind of proven to be something which just I always look back on now with bad memories.
No, that's fair. That's fair. And if it's stuck in you in that regard, and it's stuck in you in that regard. I came looking for something from NXT here. Nothing. This is something to really put forward. Like, I didn't immediately think this match. It's this show as a whole. I went looking and I remembered this match, and I remember particularly thinking, this was for NXT this year. This was really good. Like, of course, going forward and moving on, it has its issues, but that's nothing related to this show as a whole. Like what this show is and what it's doing.
I think this show set up a lot of the problems. That's why I don't like it.
Yeah, but no, that's completely fair. But
I don't
So,
not like it. It's just like it's very mixed. Like it has the highs. I think Gargano versus Balor was like amazing. I remember a lot of people at the time weren't so high on it, and I was just like,
no, it was
that was
brilliant.
really really good because just the way in which they told that story, and it really showed and it justified Gargano's heel turn later because he kind of showed his frustration within that match, and I was kind of thinking, where do they go with Gargano from here now? And then by the end of the night, they had paid that off, and they obviously shut that up the wall later down the line. But yeah, I don't know. And maybe if they'd had a crowd, they would have had another absolute banger. But just I don't know. I remember when last year before Ciampa was injured, or now it's 2 years ago technically, in 2019 when they tried to do the turn to try and do that another match between Gargano and Ciampa, I was like, nah, they're forcing this now. And then when Ciampa came back, I was like, they're gonna force it again, aren't they? And then they did make it better because the heel turn from Gargano was more earned this time. But I was too conscious of the fact that they're just doing what they couldn't do last year, rather than looking at what they've got now and changing the scenario and stuff. So even though it kind of worked, I was just too irked by the way in which NXT was working.
No, that's fair. But I think a lot of what, for me personally, listening to what you're saying, a lot of what you're applying context because you've got
After the fact, yeah,
you take because you're obviously thinking about what happens after.
Yeah.
So if this were to put in front of someone as a show, and a show, here is a quality wrestling show from NXT.
Yeah. It's still a really good show.
Although
I loved it when we watched it.
Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I might be criticized for it. I don't know. But like when I think of like the top 5 stuff, I do think having a representative for each show is healthy. Because they do represent different things of wrestling, and we've talked about this quite a lot. Like over 2020 now, in how we obviously watch AEW, and when New Japan is on and it's got major stuff going on, we'll watch New Japan because that's our bag. NXT has, for us to say it's gotten worse is a very personal opinion. You could objectively go ahead and create an argument.
I think most people would say that, so objectively, I think it's a fair point to make, yeah.
But it is in a different it's in a different direction to where it previously was, and people are going to say it's not, and I'm in agreement with that. It's not as good, but there's still people watching it, and having a representative show that's there to say, look, if you're going to pick out something in NXT, this is the one for me. Because In Your House wasn't that great for me personally.
Terrible.
There was the American shows, but they weren't. That was NXT TV show. I forgot. Is it American Bash?
Oh, Great American Bash. Yeah, they were TV specials. They weren't takeovers.
Yeah, but we're including them. They're shows.
30 and 31.
Yeah.
Which were both had their high points, but also and were consistently good wrestling shows. It's just the story elements around it and the builds and stuff were a bit of a trouble. And then War Games was also a good show. It was an amazing main event, which had a really good build and I really liked. But then had its issues as well. NXT isn't bad. It's just it's not the level it was for my taste, and it's not competing with its direct competition in AEW. On the same level of quality, so it's kind of always going to look a bit worse than it is. I don't think it's terrible, although there's been some aspects of it which have been. It is still their developmental brand at the end of the day, so you're still going to get your, random bloke having a match here and there. But yeah. Either way,
if you are interested in that side of things with NXT and all that sort of stuff, we have done a video on that where we feel NXT need to progress in 2021. So if that is something of interest to you, if you feel the same way as us, and by all means check out that video, and that's where we go into more detail about something like that. But we're all about the good stuff in this video. This I think we talk about it quite a bit, just to say as well, because we are a bit passionate about it, just a little bit, because we're a bit gutted that it's in this state. I just want to I want to put that, make that clear. I don't want to come across like NXT hate sort of stuff. At the end of the day, both shows doing extremely well will help everyone. You know, it's just a shame that NXT have dropped, in our personal opinion.
Anywho, how many shows have you got left?
I've got one left, and it's obvious what that one is.
Is it AEW Revolution?
Maybe.
Okay, you run away with that then, because I've got another one after that.
Oh, we're going to jump straight into Revolution, which is, in my opinion, definitely the best.
Blooming heck.
Bloody hell, mate. Bloody hell. Okay. Okay. I'm not going to talk too much on the match because, well, we're going to get to it later. It's probably my favorite match of all time in my personal of all. Like, I care about that match so much. We could talk objectively about best matches, but in terms of matches that I care about, that's my personal one there. We talked about Full Gear in how it was consistent, and unfortunately, that's not Revolution's strong point. There are some lows in this card, and when I mean lows, I mean starting out with Hager versus Jake Hager and Dustin Rhodes.
If you start the pay-per-view after that match, it's a really good show.
Yeah, and there are matches on here.
That's the equivalent of like New Japan's little tags at the start of Wrestle Kingdom.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, talking of new, well, it's pre-show stuff. We're not going to go into the pre-show stuff. Darby Allin, but we're all about the good stuff. Darby Allin versus Sammy Guevara, absolute train wreck in the best way.
Cocaine wrestling.
It was absolutely ridiculous. It was just a short stint match of just absolute ridiculousness, and after a match like Hager and Rhodes, it was perfect because my god, it was slow. Hager and Dustin Rhodes, and so having something like Allin and Guevara straight after that, talking about cocaine, rejects you with that and gets you going for the rest of the night, right? And then what did you get after that? Only the best match of this year: Kenny Omega, Adam Page, and Young Bucks. Absolutely phenomenal match. We'll get onto that later. Nyla Rose versus Chris Statlander. A great AEW Women's match, Championship match. I'm not going to say a great women's match, right? But what I will say is, it's for the context of AEW Women's Division, it's a great match.
Yeah.
Could be better. MJF versus Cody, phenomenal story heading in once they got it right,
Yeah,
absolutely phenomenal. And the match was good. It was good.
Yeah,
it wasn't bad, it wasn't great, it was good. And you can't complain about that, right?
It served the story very well, didn't it?
Yeah. And then what did we get after that? Pac versus Orange Cassidy. A phenomenal match, a very short match, surprisingly, 13 minutes. Right, I didn't think this was like a 30-minute thing at all, but I'm very surprised by how short it was. They played this match to absolute perfection, and I'm going to talk about this match a bit more because we're going to talk about the Ever Buns later on. But Pac versus Orange Cassidy, Pac played his role perfectly. This was like, we see Pac being a dick and all these variety of things, and yes, he is the best at that. But him in a comedy match is something we would never thought he would excel. No, not so much like he wouldn't excel in it, but we didn't think he'd excel this much. Especially with Orange Cassidy in the corner. This is where everyone was like sold on Orange Cassidy. Like, yes, there were people like myself and you. We liked him from the get-go. It was like, this is AEW. It's got like stellar matches, but it's going to take things ridiculously. Like when it goes into comedic elements, it's going to go all in on that as well. And that's what Orange Cassidy represents. And that is what this match represents as well. It was great. The near falls. Like, it was all about Pac just undermining Cassidy, and then Cassidy getting those blips of offense, just making you think as if he's going to get that final pinfall. Unfortunately, this did start the Orange Cassidy train of putting him in matches too often for my liking, because I think it should be a rarity. But with that being said, this was the best Orange Cassidy match.
Yeah, for sure.
And then we had Jon Moxley and Chris Jericho ending the show, and we got, after a stellar story, after a stellar build of Jon Moxley as a character as a whole, right? And I don't mean that it's like there was like a really defined story. I mean just in terms of build. The guy, he didn't lose. He was just, but he was always backtracked with story with this particular person here, with Kenny Omega at Full Gear, and then it was that build, and then there was the car shenanigans, and then it was in the circle, and then there was the eye for an eye with Santana, and there was like this entire build heading up to this match. The match itself, again, Chris Jericho, like it's kind of weird, but it was great. It wasn't brilliant. It wasn't even good. It was great. Like it was what it needed to be for a main event of Revolution's caliber. And then we ended the show with, at the beginning of the best babyface title run of wrestling in recent history for me.
Yeah.
You know, although that's taken into context of what happens after. But this is the beginning of that. And so that's always going to serve a very positive memory as well.
I think even at the time, you thought this is now Jon Moxley with the title is going to be something good. Like,
yes,
you'd seen enough of Jon Moxley in AEW to know this is amazing. And I remember at the time, you know, we were kind of already drawing those kind of Stone Cold comparisons purely in that kind of badass baby face, drops people when he needs to and stuff. Like things like when he like had in a circle on strings for ages about whether he'd join, and then he just drops them all. That's the kind of stuff that Stone Cold will be doing, like obviously killer promos and stuff, and even the wrestling style was there's similarities there as well. So we were really drawing that comparison, and I think it's probably the best babyface title reign since that kind of era, you know. And partly because, you know, and I mean in like American wrestling, that is obviously Japanese is completely different. Okada's title reign amazing as well, but it was, so you even thought that at the time. But yeah, the show, I think we're going to agree on that as show as the year then, because it's my show of the year as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, the fact it had like one of the best matches ever, let alone the year, you know, in most people's, probably the best tag team match ever, again, in most people's opinion, that it seems to be the case. That only goes to help. There was those low points, but when you have highs quite that high, it's hard to like ignore them. And then when your undercard is things like Darby Allin versus Sammy Guevara and Pac versus Orange Cassidy and stuff, I think this show really could have done with a TNT Championship match instead of that Dustin versus Hager match. Like that's the one thing Full Gear has over it, is like another match where you had that kind of consistency and a match which kind of deserved to be on a pay-per-view rather than just a random, you know, thing. But you know, it was just great. He was just great. And my final show, which I don't really know how to rank or place, so that's why I kind of talked about it last, is the Brody Lee Memorial Dynamite episode. Just because, again, I was talking to you about that 6-man tag with Hangman and Dark Order versus Inner Circle, and how a lot of people are giving that, like, I think it's ranked in the top 10 matches of the year on Grapple and Cage Match. Brian Alvarez and Meltzer were talking about it as genuinely a great wrestling match, or like an all-time great. And it's like, because you have to like view things in their context and what they're supposed to be and stuff. And that match was amazing, and the night as a whole was just the perfect like tribute. I remember everyone was just there, just saying how great it was. And I think for that reason, I didn't know how to rank it, because obviously the wrestling quality wasn't of the standard of G1, but wasn't what it was about.
No.
Or, you know, the other AEW pay-per-views. It wasn't what this show was about. It was about something different. So
yeah,
it was hard to rank.
No, it shouldn't be ranked. It shouldn't be ranked, but it should be mentioned. It should be honored.
Yeah. So I just thought I'll throw that in my top 5, and it'll be somewhere in there. You can put it where you want. But yeah, so just wanted to give that a quick mention.